There's a video trending right now of Denver police officers doing the Lord's work dealing with an armed robbery suspect. These officers did a great job in dealing with the tactical problem as well as recognizing that there were medical problems that need to be dealt with. What I want to do in this video is just take a second to narrate a bit as the incident relates to TECC guidelines and best practices as far as dealing with incidents inside the hot zone. Let's go ahead and take a look at the video.
What are you saying? Seven man make, ready to flag down on disturbance. Shot fired!
So at this point, nobody can argue as far as TECC guidelines for first responders go, is that this is a hot zone. This is a direct threat engagement. And as we look at the guidelines, the number one thing that we have to do under TECC guidelines is mitigate the threat and direct first responders to remain engaged if possible. So let's see that play out.
I have an officer hit in the leg. Give me cars here, code 10. Trav, I got you. Watch out.
So they've identified that the threat has been mitigated. In this video, these are just small nitpicking things, but we still have to mitigate the threat and direct the responder to stay engaged. If we transition to medical too fast, we can limit our ability to mitigate the threat and for our partners to stay engaged. This officer identified that his partner had been hit in the leg. That's fantastic. However, in this case, the officer remained engaged and attempted to get up and continue to do work, but was stopped from doing that by his partner wanting to transition to a tourniquet right away. The next thing we need to do is extract a casualty to safety. In this case, these guys are already in a pretty good position of cover. So the casualty, being the officer who's up working right now, has already been extracted to a point of safety for them to consider the next step. Remember, the next step and the only thing we're going to do in a hot zone is stop life-threatening bleeding.
Step up. Lift your foot up, bud.
Here's where we need to get better. Identification of life-threatening bleeding, if present. As we can see here, there's some blood loss, but we've watched this officer be able to stay upright, move into a better position, and we don't see any obvious mass hemorrhage. Therefore, in this case, we're still in a hot zone. So we don't want to be placing tourniquets if we don't need to. While the trend is definitely to place a tourniquet early on in interventions, that's only if mass hemorrhage is actually present and that the tourniquet will actually be doing something that needs to be done. In this case, we still have other people that need to be dealt with. The threat has been mitigated, but it is still unknown. Also, one of the considerations that we need to have is that we only have so much equipment. This was a large populous area during the shooting, and we may have other persons who are injured, either by our gunfire or the suspect's gunfire, that may need a tourniquet worse than what our officer actually does. So remember, guys, this is a step-by-step process that we need to do. An assessment is the first part of that process. I don't have any issue with placing a tourniquet eventually, but why take a leg out of the fight if we don't need to? Eventually, it's going to have to get dealt with, but maybe it's not right now. Considerations of amount of officers you have working also come into play. In this case, they knew that other officers were coming, and in a metropolitan area like Denver, there's likely going to be multiple officers who can respond to this quickly. In a more rural area, maybe it may be necessary to get to a higher up intervention such as a tourniquet a little bit faster, but all of that is situationally dependent. Again, this isn't a knock against these officers. These guys did great work. It's just a consideration for all you guys as we look at combining our tactical training with our medical training and when is the most appropriate time to do these sort of interventions. In this case, these guys had to go and then treat other people, so we have limited equipment to deal with the problems that we're facing. So again, let's just try to do a little bit better each and every time we look at these incidents. It doesn't mean that what these guys did was wrong. It doesn't mean that these guys failed or that they should be chastised for going to an intervention a little bit earlier than they might have needed to. But let's learn from these videos that we're watching and get better as we go. All right, guys, this is Jim Daxter from Tactically Sound. Get trained, stay equipped, be willing.